We're back, joined as we have the privilege of being each week by Gordon Chang, one of the country's foremost experts on Asia, a man that the international and national media turn to for his insights and assessments, notably his column at Forbes.com and WorldAffairsJournal.com blog, also at Fox News, among many other outlets, including our own. Gordon, welcome back. Good to have you with us, as always.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Well, earlier today, China was among the permanent members of the UN Security Council who joined in a unanimous show of support for the Obama bomb deal, as I call it. Talk, if you would, Gordon, a little bit about the relationship between China and Iran. I have long thought that China considers Iran really a client. What has that meant in terms of these negotiations, and now what's likely to flow from that relationship going forward?
Well, China has supported the Iran nuclear program with technology, also with diplomatic support, both at the governing board of the International Atomic Energy Agency, as well as the Security Council of the United Nations. And this has been both direct and indirect. So, for instance, China has supported Pakistan's proliferation efforts, or also North Korea's proliferation efforts, and China has supplied materials and technology directly, especially in the first decade of this century. Now, China sees Iran as sort of an ally because it wants influence in the Middle East, competing with Russia, and it also, of course, wants cheap hydrocarbons, oil and gas. So there is a multifaceted relationship here.
Which has presumably translated into a keen interest on China's part in getting back into Iran full force, and also, I guess, releasing some of these frozen assets that would presumably flow from the UN Security Council action a bit later this year.
Well, China has missed very few opportunities to support the Iranians, either with regard to their nuclear program or with regard to their other programs. So this is something that we have seen. It goes back decades, and we're going to see this going forward. And this is one of the reasons that it made it so hard for the international community to come to consensus, because China was always there to take the side of the atomic ayatollahs. And we got to understand the dynamics here, especially because China has been the world's massive proliferator.
It has indeed, and there's no sign that that is abating. If anything, I think it will be intensifying with or without this deal in the years to come. Gordon, one of the things that I've been intrigued by, we had conversation about this last week, is the ability of the Chinese to tell their story, often really very ill-disguised propaganda in this country without any serious impediment. In fact, broadcast via cable on millions of boxes around the United States in households across the country. What is the counterpart access, if any, of the United States, either public media or private sector media, to markets in China, and does that asymmetrical relationship augur ill for both our understanding of China and more to the point, our ability to help affect change within it?
The key word you use there is asymmetric, because China has free access to America media outlets, and cable shows, CCTV, China Central Television, all Xinhua News Agency, they all have free access to the United States. On the other hand, CNN is in China, but only in hotels, extremely restricted, and most other cable networks are not available in China at all. Radio Free Asia, Voice of America are extremely restricted in China. They do have reporters, but they don't have access to the airwaves. So this is something which we have yet to decide what to do, because we have Chinese journalists who, many of them are intelligence agents, running around the U.S., and our reporters are severely restricted with visa restrictions that have been onerous. So this is a trade issue. This is a freedom issue. We have not dealt with it. It's neither this administration or the one before it. Shame on both of them.
I guess it's speaking of the Iran deal, sort of reminiscent to the kinds of opportunities that have been missed to influence what have been disadvantageous relationships or arrangements within our relationship with these other powers, despite our vaunted negotiators' efforts. Gordon, let me ask you about another very important development in your area of interest, Asia. The Japanese government adopted important amendments to the so-called peace constitution in the past few days. What is that about, and what do you think its implications are for not only Japan, but perhaps for the region, and for that matter, for our interests?
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been very vigorous in trying to get through the Diet, which is the national legislature, bills which would broaden the interpretation of what Japan's self-defense forces can do. And this whole issue is collective self-defense, whether the Japanese can come to the aid of the United States, for instance, when Japan itself is not attacked. And he has lost a fair amount of popularity for doing this because the opposition to this has been widespread, but actually has been quite thin. But Abe has been very courageous in pushing Japan in a much better direction. This harkens back to one of his relatives, who is also prime minister, who at great peril to himself pushed through the Japan-U.S. Mutual Security Treaty and then had to resign. So this is a tradition in Abe's family. He deserves a lot of respect and kudos for doing what he did, because this does harm himself politically. But clearly he wants to make sure that Japan is a responsible member of the international community and is willing to stand up to its defense commitments to the United States and to others.
Does it also signal, Gordon, in your estimation, that there's going to be a more assertive Japanese military in the future that will be quite apart from its security commitments to us and others, well, standing up, for example, to the increasing aggressiveness of China?
Yes, in recent weeks, a Japanese patrol plane exercised with their Philippine counterparts in the South China Sea, far away from Japan's shores. This was important because on board the plane with the Japanese personnel were Philippine military observers. And this is important. Also, Japanese troops participated in the biennial Malabar exercises in Australia with the Australians and us. So this is an important thing for Japan, because it is broadening its networks with others in the region. This is going to be good because it's going to help the United States in a very difficult exercise of trying to contain Chinese expansionism.
Well, it's not just China. Of course, as you know, Gordon, you've written the book about North Korea's aggressiveness, nuclear showdown North Korea takes on the world. You've recently written at the Daily Beast a very troubling piece about one other capability that the North Koreans may be bringing to bear, namely biological weapons, and raised the question as to whether they may even be testing anthrax on their own people. This is an unspeakably awful regime, but that seems even unimaginable for them. Talk about that.
Yes. Well, last few weeks, North Korea's state media released photographs of Kim Jong-un, the ruler, touring a biological institute near Pyongyang. The equipment that was shown in the photographs is dual use and can be used not only for making fertilizer, but also anthrax. And clearly the North Koreans went to great expense to obtain this material and this equipment. And so it's probably, it is certain that they are not interested in just fertilizer, because they could have bought this stuff cheaply on international markets. Also, at the same time, we are going to hear the testimony of a defector who brought with him a hard drive, and he says that he has information on North Korea's testing of biological weapons on human subjects. Now, a number of defectors have said this over the course of more than decades. This guy says he actually has proof. We don't know quite yet, and there are many people who are skeptical, but clearly the North Koreans have been up to no good. I'm sure that they've been testing not only biologicals, but also chemical weapons on their citizens. And this, of course, is horrific.
It is horrific, and it is a clear signal to the rest of us. If they treat their own people that way, what do they have in mind for us? Gordon Chang, thank you so much for your time today. As always, we are grateful, as we are, for your superb writings at, among other places, The Daily Beast and, of course, Forbes.com and Fox News. Keep it up. Come back to us again next week, if you would. Next up, former senior U.S. government official and Western Hemisphere expert Jose Cardenas on the opening of U.S. and Cuban embassies today. That and more, straight ahead.